Okay, we're on. Good morning. Whoa, a little too loud. Welcome to the January 10th, 2019 Placer County Planning Commission meeting. Would you please stand and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here. Roll call, Sue, please.
Good morning. Let's see. Mr. Haughey.
Here.
Mr. Herzog.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Here.
Mr. Nader.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, Planning Director, EJ.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the Commission. EJ Haughey with the Planning Services Division. First off, congratulations, Nathan Herzog, for reappointment to the Commission. The board took that action on Tuesday. I look at it more as a 4-year enlistment.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But I want to congratulate you on that. Also, our District 1 appointment was also made for Supervisor Bonnie Dorr. That will be her appointment as Sam Cannon. He's a resident of West Roseville. What I do know is he served on the Planning Commission for Roseville for, I think, the last 8 years. Obviously, he's not at today's meeting, but he will be on the January 24th meeting. At the board also on Tuesday, they considered the Darefield minor use permit for the caretaker residence and variance. They ended up denying the appeal and upholding the decision of the zoning administrator. That decision was pretty unique on their part based on the fact that there were previous permits issued and the square footage changed in 2012, as you remember. So they didn't want that to be anything precedent setting, and pretty much made a point that, you know, we need to stick to the 1,200 square foot limitation, but there were special circumstances related to this one where it was approved. So any questions on that? Okay. So upcoming Planning Commission meetings, the next one is scheduled for January 24th. That is in Auburn. We have a pretty full agenda. The draft EIR hearing for the Placer Retirement Residences, that's the project down in Granite Bay. The United Auburn Indian Community Tribal School in Loomis will be on that agenda. There's an appeal of a parcel map modification. And then we also have a Placer Vineyard specific plan amendment for property 1A, and that's the property on the westernmost side of the Placer Vineyard specific plan area. Then going into February 14th, we will be doing the draft EIR hearing, I should say meeting, for the Sunset Area Plan and Placer Ranch specific plan. And then late February, I'm not sure if we'll be in Tahoe or not, but we'll know more at the next meeting. I think that's all I have for today, unless you have any questions.
Okay, any questions for EJ? Thank you, EJ.
All right, thank you.
Before we move on to our next item, I just wanted to mention for one of our topic, the Alpine Meadows project, if you plan on speaking, we have a sign-up list for that, so I want to give you some time to sign up. Kara, where is that list right now? Okay, on this table. So if you would like to speak, because we'll be calling people up, would you please go over and sign up on that? Okay, we'll move to the next item, which is Planning Commission officers for 2019. And so I'll open it for recommendations or motions.
Chairman Nader, I have a recommendation and a motion to make regarding this year's appointments. I'd like to make a motion that we move to have Jeffrey Moss as chair, Larry Stevenson as vice chair, and Anders Haughey as secretary.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that?
Actually,
Motions
need to all be made separately.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, we'll take the first one.
Let me,
then.
we'll start
Okay,
with
for Jeff as
Moss.
chair for
Chair.
2019. Anyone want to second that?
I'll second it.
Oh, okay, we've got lots of seconds. Everybody. Okay. Let you decide on that, Sue.
Okay. We have a first, Nathan Herzog has moved that Commissioner Moss be chair, and that was seconded by Rich Johnson. So could I get a vote from Mr. Haughey?
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd also like to make a motion that we appoint Larry Stevenson as the vice chair for the planning commission.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got more seconds again. I'll let you pick, Sue.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Herzog and a second by Mr. Haughey. So a vote from Mr. Haughey.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Okay.
Mr. Johnson? I'm sorry, Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd also like to make a motion that we have Anders Haughey as secretary for the planning commission.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
I have a first by Mr. Herzog, a second by Mr. Sevison. Mr. Haughey?
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the new officers, and congratulations, Jeff.
We're
It's
going to
gonna be
have
an
a party or
exciting year.
anything?
It's all yours.
Thank you.
Before we get on with the agenda, I'd just like to take a quick minute and thank Commissioner Nader for his service as chairman this last year. Kept things running nice and smooth, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now it's time for public comment. These would be comments on anything that is not on the agenda. Anybody like to address the commission on anything that's not on the agenda? Now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment and move on to the consent agenda. We will be doing the consent agenda in two separate motions here. The first one being the approval of the December 13th meeting minutes. We have a motion on that.
I'll make the motion.
We have a second.
Second.
I have a first by Mr. Johnson, a second by Mr. Sevison, and a vote from Mr. Haughey.
Abstain, I was not at the meeting.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Thank you.
Second,
I think we should just ask to make sure nobody was holding the
okay, I was going to make that for the Porcupine Hill. I didn't know we needed to do that for the meeting minutes. Does anybody wish that the extension for the Porcupine Hill subdivision be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and ask Commission for a motion on item B.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
You have a motion and a second?
I have a first from Mr. Johnson. I believe the second was Mr. Nader. So a vote for Mr. Haughey,
Yes.
Mr. Herzog,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Sevison,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, now we will get to the 10:05, so we're good on time. The Alpine Sierra subdivision. Again, we'll say there is a sign-up sheet in the back here for anybody who'd like to speak. And I think we have a timer in place, do we not, Sue? So we would like those speaking to limit their comments to about 3 minutes. I think there's a warning light that comes on at about 2 minutes and lets you know it's time to start wrapping things up. And then the red light will come on and it's time to be finished. Alex?
Great. Good morning, Commissioners. Congratulations, Mr. Moss, on your appointment as Chair. For those who don't know me, my name is Alex Fish. I'm a supervising planner with the Planning Services Division, and I'm also the project manager for the Alpine Sierra project, which we'll be presenting today. Before I give staff's presentation, I want to take a moment to introduce other county staff, our EIR consultant, and the applicant, as well as responsible agency staff that we have in attendance as technical resources. To my right here is Phil France. He is the county's engineer for the project. Catherine Waugh. Catherine, could you raise your hand? She is the county's environmental consultant with DUDEC. Chris Nelson is the applicant and managing partner. Doug Clyde is his consultant with, pardon me, Doug, Mountain Resort Consulting. We also have Division Chief Todd Conradson with the North Tahoe Fire Protection District, Chief Schwartz as well, and also Eric Hornvelt, the Defensible Fuels Coordinator. And I don't believe John Collins is in attendance yet, but John Collins is the General Manager of the Alpine Springs County Water District. He's at a Budget and Finance meeting and should be here momentarily. So just to kind of tell you how things will go, after I deliver staff's presentation, the applicant would like to have an opportunity to present the commission with information pertaining to the ownership history. They have a short PowerPoint presentation. Also covers the project intent and the planning and engineering effort undertaken by their team. I'll also note that while the project is relatively small in scale, due to the complexity of the project and the sensitivity of the planning environment, there is a lot of detail to the project and the environmental analysis, prepared and support. I've incorporated a lot of those details into the staff report in your packet. I'll attempt to touch on each of those areas in the oral presentation, but for the sake of time, I will be brief, knowing that there will be ample opportunity for discussion following the presentation. So the entitlement actions requested of the Commission today are recommendations, a set of package recommendations to the Board of Supervisors for the project. Those actions include a recommendation on certification of the Alpine Sierra Subdivision Final Environmental Impact Report, approval of a general plan amendment and a rezoning, approval of a vesting tentative subdivision map, and approval of a conditional use permit for a planned unit development. The project site is, this is it here, this is the regional vicinity map. It's located in the community of Alpine Meadows, general plan area, which encompasses about 3,600 acres of land. It's 12 miles south of the town of Truckee, about 5 miles northwest of Tahoe City. The project site is located on the east side of Alpine Meadows Road. Here we can see a close-up regional vicinity map. It is approximately 3 miles from the intersection of State Route 89 and Alpine Meadows Road, just immediately north of the Alpine Meadows Ski Resort base area, which is here at the bottom of the slide. Just to orient you on the surroundings, as I said, this is Alpine Meadows Road here to the northwest of the project. Here is Chalet Road leading back to some single-family residences and the Chalet condominiums. Bear Creek crosses over a portion of the site, the flag that provides the physical access to the project. There is also a unnamed seasonal stream that crosses over the easterly portion of the project site here. This is the Bear Creek Association neighborhood immediately northwest of the project, and further up in this area is the Alpine Estates Association. So this project was originally, an application for this project rather was originally submitted in January of 2013. The applicant submitted applications for approval of the project, which at that time was proposed as a 47-unit planned unit development. It consisted of 27 custom home sites in the eastern portion of the project site, and the western development pod was a mixture of cabin lots. There were 6 cabin lots and then 14 half-plex lots. Those half-plex units are effectively like a duplex unit, but they're divided by a property boundary. At that time, the project was proposing to include 14.2 acres of open space. It would be served by a privately maintained road with a single point of access from Alpine Meadows Road. The existing U.S. Forest Service trail that crosses the site was proposed, as much as it is now, to be maintained within the existing easements where feasible, and other portions would be relocated to a new easement location. The project proposed to include about 1,000 square foot HOA meeting room and residence for an employee where tools would be stored, such as a front loader for snow removal. and the project would have been developed in up to 4 phases. So here is a graphic representation of that map. I'll just touch on this briefly. This is the eastern development pod over here, the single point of access to the project here. These lots here are the halfplex units that I described, and these were the cabin lots. Having a little trouble with the clicker. And this is an illustrative map showing the same configuration. Purpose of the illustrative, of course, is to give you all a sense of what the completed project appearance might be as far as from a land use and development perspective. This is the rezoning exhibit for the project. On the left is the existing zoning designations as they are today. The project is principally comprised of 2 zoning designations for residential single-family use, one of which is with an intensity of 2 dwelling units per acre. The other 2 RS pieces, shown in yellow, have an intensity of 4 dwelling units per acre. And then the balance of the site, about 9.8 acres under the existing conditions, is designated as open space. On the right here is the proposed rezoning that went with that originally proposed project, which is referenced as Alternative A in the EIR. So I apologize, I've lost my spot here. I think I flipped past a location. Okay. Well, I'm just going to have to go from here. So I'll pause. In April of 2014, the county circulated a notice of preparation of an EIR for this project, and we did receive a number of comments, both oral and written. We received written comments from 18 private citizens and 5 comment letters from agencies and organizations. Comments covered a variety of topics, including issues such as impacts from noise, traffic, air quality, biological resources, hydrology and water quality, grading, visual resources, and hazards. And there were also a number of comments that were not purely environmental in nature and that were generally targeted at the project's compatibility with adjoining developed land uses. From these comments, the county staff, the EIR consultant, and the applicant team began discussions of how best to address these issues in the environmental analysis. And with the agreement and cooperation of the applicant, county staff and the EIR consultant determined that the EIR would include a co-equal project alternative referred to as Alternative B in the EIR, which would incorporate a number of provisions to address the issues raised in the NOP scoping comments. And so our jumping off point for that was to really formulate a set of project objectives that were targeted to address the thrust of the main comments. And one of the principal comments was that the halfplex units were not compatible with adjoining developed land uses, that the intensity was too much, and that they didn't fit in with the existing developed land use patterns of Alpine Meadows. Something else that came out of it, both from staff and from the public, was that the project site has a lot of steep slopes. Much of the site has slopes in excess of 30%. The county general plan does include policies that restrict grading and development on slopes in excess of 30%. And that building envelopes should be established in those areas to ensure that those portions of the site would not be developed. Going with that would reduce the overall project grading and footprint, as well as some of the impacts associated with that. There were a number of comments pertaining to stormwater quality, hydrology, snow storage, water treatment, and so there was a discussion to incorporate low-intensity development features into the project beyond those that were designed to serve the subdivision improvements. These would be LID features for each individual lot at that time. Placer County had not yet developed its LID ordinance. We were out in front of that a little bit. There were also objectives to increase the stream corridor protection area in the eastern portion of the project in order to better protect site resources, retain existing ephemeral drainage ways and function to the maximum extent practical, relocate the HOA meeting room and maintenance facility to a better location. The site that was selected over in the Western Development Pod was very steep, very constrained. There just was not enough space to provide all of the necessary improvements at that site. And then lastly, to improve a emergency preparedness and evacuation plan, and ultimately that effort was coordinated with the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. So that leads us to what we have before us today, the proposed project. The proposed project is what is described as Alternative B in the draft EIR. That is the only project that is presented today for entitlement consideration. That's what the applicant has selected as their preferred project. And through the county staff's analysis and the EIR analysis, that project ultimately rose to the top as being the preferred project for a number of reasons relevant to the objectives that I just laid out. So with that, again, the project comprises approximately 47 acres. It would have a developed footprint of about 28 acres. Different than Alternative A, the proposed project would increase open space by almost 5 acres, up to 18.93 acres. The project would remain being served by a single point of access. There are physical constraints with ownership of adjoining properties that prohibit, that have not resulted in the ability of the applicant to legally obtain alternative means of egress. Like the original proposed project, the existing U.S. Forest Service trail easements would be maintained within the existing easement area where possible, and there would be some realignments. Distinct from the project is the incorporation of a 3,000 square foot HOA lodge building with space for a front loader and other maintenance tools in a location that's much better suited. That's now in the second phase of the project. Phase B would be located in this area in the far north eastern portion of the project. As with the prior project, there would be an on-site employee unit, and the project would be developed in up to 3 phases. All lots are non-pad graded. That was another thing that staff really pushed hard for, was that we didn't want, because of the visual sensitivities with the site and the runoff and other issues, wanted to restrict the amount of grading to just that's necessary for the actual footprint of the home and the driveway improvements to serve the home. So this is the representation of the map here. The main difference in this area is the inclusion of a 28th lot in the eastern portion of the project site. There's some slight revisions to the alignment of the roadways, but they're essentially the same. The major difference is over here in the western development pod, where instead of the 14 half-plex units and the 6 cabin lots, you now have a total of 10 cabin lots and no half-plex units. And a couple of the portions of the site where the slopes were excessively steep have been excluded from the development plan. Again, just showing an illustrative plan, a larger view of this to show the visual representation of the land use pattern. I should mention while I'm here some of the other changes, particularly in the eastern portion of the project area. A number of lots, these are lots 3 and 4 and 5, as well as I believe this is 9 through 11 or 12 here, have restricted building envelopes. So all the areas where the site has slopes in excess of 30% have been excluded from available building area. This is the rezoning exhibit for the proposed project. As you can see on the right, that is different from the existing zoning. There is a significant increase in the amount of open space that's incorporated into the project. The residential single-family B20 with a dwelling unit intensity of 4 units per acre portion of the site has principally been rezoned or would be rezoned to open space. A small portion of that would be rezoned to a residential single-family zoning with 2 dwelling units per acre. And we've also incorporated the stream corridor in the eastern portion of the project site, as well as other portions of the open space parcels under the common ownership of the HOA into open space zoning. And I should mention that the project would have approximately 9 acres more open space than under existing circumstances. So this is an example of the type of units that the applicant expects would be developed in the western development pod, referred to as the cabin lots. These units are approximately 3,000 to 5,000 square foot in size, including garage space, and of course, depending on market demand and other desires of builders and property owners. In the eastern portion of the project site, larger homes would be developed. The lots are larger. They average in size approximately 0.6 acres, 6/10 of an acre. They range from about 4/10 to just shy of an acre. The western development pod, the average lot size is about 2/10 of an acre. Or excuse me, it's 3/10 of an acre, and they range from 2/10 to 4/10. As I mentioned previously, the project would be constructed in up to 3 phases, phases A, B, and C. The first phase is phase A. These are the cabin lots in the western development pod. This portion of the project would develop Road A serving those lots, as well as Court B, all of the dry utilities and wet utilities, sewer and water, and the drainage improvements. I should also mention here that prior to county approval of improvement plans or a final map for Phase A, the project proponent would be required to purchase and dedicate a Type 1 four-wheel drive pumper truck to the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. That truck would include a minimum 750-gallon tank with a 1,500-gallon per minute pumping capacity to enhance NTFPD's service capabilities. They would also completely fund improvements to the Alpine Springs County Water District potable water delivery system to upgrade booster pump stations B, C, and D to correct existing flow deficiencies in the existing system, which presently do not meet minimum state requirements for fire flow. I believe the minimum requirements are around 2,500 PSI. There's a 600-700 PSI difference. Mr. Collins can address that much better than I can, so I won't get into that. There's also an existing Alpine Springs County Water District water tank on this property here, adjacent to the project site. The applicant would fund, construct, and dedicate a radio repeater site and implement the National Informer Transmitter System. That's a fail-safe emergency alert system that the project would fund and construct. Those of you who were on the commission at the time when we received the draft EIR comments may remember that one of the commenters said that there should be a fail-safe emergency notification system. That's been incorporated into the project since the draft EIR was circulated. Each residence within the project would be required to participate, and residences outside of the project boundary could also electively participate by installing a unit in their homes. Approximate cost is $500 for that unit. The project would also, for the entirety of the site, would implement a forest management and fuel reduction plan, which would treat the entire project site as defensible space. Under the existing conditions, the project site, the forest condition is pretty substantially deteriorated due to excessive fuel buildup. Long-term management of the site as defensible space would reduce the threat of wildfire to the site and to its immediate neighbors. So Phase B of the project, that's these lots over here. You can see the phase boundary. I believe it encompasses 17 lots. In the eastern portion of the project, that includes lots 1 through 4, 15 through 27. The Phase B project would include the portion of the private on-site Road A to Court C, the Court C roadway improvements, 2 bridges over the unnamed seasonal stream, and importantly would also include construction of an HOA lodge. We'll touch on this in a little bit. That HOA lodge is going to be designed as a shelter-in-place facility, developed to a higher level of fire defensibility than even the homes on the project site, which are going to exceed Chapter 7A requirements by including exterior sprinklers as well as the interior sprinklers and the other non-combustible building standards that are incorporated into Chapter 7A of the Building Code. There's also I should mention, there's a sewer lift station over in this portion of the site. That'll be constructed with Phase B. Phase A can gravity sewer. The remainder of the project will sewer to this lift station, and then that will pump out to a line in Road A. And then lastly, of course, the final phase is Phase C. That includes lots 5 through 14 and 28, and improvements include the remainder of Road A as well as 2 bridges over the unnamed seasonal stream. This graphic here shows the on-site roadways. Those roadways would be constructed to a modified rural minor residential plate 102 standard. Portions of Road A located between Alpine Meadows Road and the western boundary of lots 1 and 2 in the western development pod would consist of 2 12-foot travel lanes plus 3 foot of curb gutter on one side and gravel shoulders. Portions of Road A and C, where fronting on residential lots, would be constructed to the same standard, but would also include a 4-foot sidewalk on one side of the street. Court B, serving the western development pod, would have a somewhat wider street, would have 2 14-foot travel lanes, plus 3 feet of concrete curb and gutter and a 4-foot sidewalk attached on one side. That wider roadway standard is intended to allow parking on street as well as in driveways. The eastern development pod would just have parking within driveways. We did receive a number of comments during the circulation of the draft EIR questioning whether or not the amount of snow storage was adequate for the project. So during the preparation of the final EIR, we had the applicant's engineer prepare this exhibit. Essentially what it shows is that in areas of the project site where roadside snow storage is not feasible due to physical restrictions, like this location here, where we can't get the 20 feet of the required for the full snow storage easement. There are other locations where snow can be blown to and stored. The engineer did a volumetric calculation of that snow storage area, and it exceeds the area that it is replacing. This is a graphical representation of the forest management and fuel reduction plan. You'll see that there are 3 primary fuel modification zones. The zone shown in purple here that encompasses basically the area of lot development is the structural protection zone, where fuels would be most significantly modified. We also have, shown in green here, wildland fuel reduction zone, where tree canopies will be opened up and tree crowns separated, all the fuels are removed from the forest floor, the ladder fuels. And then, of course, we have the defensible space zone that surrounds the residences in the common area open space lots. The developer would have to do this fuel modification in accordance with NTFPD's service requirements. They can speak a little bit more to that later if it's your desire. And then, of course, as the project is implemented and operated, that responsibility would continue to be with the homeowners association, who would have to manage that year over year in coordination with the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. So here's probably a good jumping off point to mention a little bit more about the emergency preparedness evacuation plan that was prepared for the project. As mentioned, the project only includes 1 point of ingress and egress. There is no legal or physically available alternative access for the project. It's been explored exhaustively by the developer. I think they can speak to that a little bit when they do their presentation. And so this presented a real challenge for the project as far as how do we ensure its safety during operation in the event that there is, in particular, a wildfire event. And so I believe it was ultimately the initiative of the applicant to suggest that we coordinate with NTFPD on that initiative, and we undertook a series of meetings and began that process. What came out of it is that with the increased building standards for each of the homes, the incorporation of the homeowners association building built to a much higher standard of defensibility to allow short sheltering in place periods. We're talking about a couple hours during an event where if evacuation is infeasible or undesirable, residents and guests could evacuate to that shelter in place facility located here at the northeastern portion of the site. And then, of course, it also includes the fuel management and fuel modification plan, the improvement of the water delivery system, not just to serve the project, but for all of Alpine Meadows residents, which presently there are some deficiencies in their service levels, the purchase of the Type 1 fire truck, and I'm probably missing something, yeah, I should also mention the project is going to, as I said earlier, incorporate a repeater site. That repeater site is going to be directly tied to the North Tahoe Fire Protection District's service capabilities. They will able to remote activate emergency notifications. It's a tone-activated system, and reach any persons that are in these homes and anyone else in the valley that would electively participate in that early warning notification system to receive broadcast of emergency information to either tell you there's an event, stay tuned, there's an event you need to shelter in place, there's an event you need to evacuate, this is the evacuation route. It'll depend on what their directives are. Also, this system will be available to the Office of Emergency Services as well as the Sheriff Department. So this is just a conceptual rendering of the HOA lodge. This is an example from another development in the area of the general appearance and approximate size of what the lodge would be. This lodge is probably a little bit larger, but it's a good visual representation of the amenities that would be at this facility. As I mentioned, it would be constructed in the second phase. It would be 3,000 square feet. It would include a fitness room, outdoor pool and spa. May also include an outdoor fire pit and picnic area. That fire pit, of course, is fired by natural gas or propane. No wood-burning devices are allowed in this project. It would serve as a shelter-in-place facility. And it would also include an HOA residence and a garage for storage of snow removal equipment. That snow removal equipment is another mitigation requirement for the project. I think you all noticed there are some avalanche areas that are affecting private on-site roadways as well as public roadways within the project. County staff thought it was prudent to ensure that the project didn't just rely on contract snow removal services, but that it would also have on-site provisions for snow removal. And so that's been incorporated into the project. And I've already touched on each of these things, so I won't go over them again. But these are the community serving project improvements: the purchase of the Type 1 fire truck, the improvements to the water delivery system, implementation of the forest management plan, and the implementation of the emergency preparedness and evacuation plan. So as I said, we did prepare an environmental impact report for this project. It was fully scoped. The only thing that was scoped out was agricultural resources because there were none on the project site. That EIR did include an analysis of alternatives. We have the two co-equal project alternatives. Alternative A, the originally proposed project. Alternative B, the project that is a lower intensity, more constrained version of that project that has incorporated a number of mitigations to address not only the physical effects of the project on the site, but also its emergency preparedness. And as I said, the applicant has ultimately selected this as their preferred project alternative and is the basis of this entitlement request. Alternative C is the no project alternative. It's typical in a scenario where we have a property that has had a land use designation and zoning designations for over 50 years now to enable development, but it has not developed. So we analyze a no project, no build, what would happen if things just continued on the way they are. And then, of course, we analyzed an alternative scenario of not rezoning the property at all, not adjusting the locations where land uses are, and what it would look like if the project were, or if an alternative project were simply developed in accordance with the existing zoning designations. Ultimately, that project looks very similar to Alternative A. The last alternative that we included was Alternative D, and it is effectively, again, an environmentally constrained version of the original project, and it is somewhat scaled back from Alternative B. What it does is removes this lot over here, which alleviates the need to construct this bridge and stream crossing, and it also removes these two lots over here, again, removing this bridge and stream crossing. So as I mentioned, we did receive a number of comments on the draft EIR. A lot of those comments touched on the same resource areas over and over, and so county staff and the EIR consultant determined that the most prudent way to address the bulk of those was through preparation of comprehensive master responses. We ended up with a total of 14 master responses, covering pretty much every area I think that the comment letters that have been received touched on. There were instances where the master response didn't necessarily capture some small element of a particular comment, and so we also provided individual comments to those comments, or individual responses to those comments. This project was presented to the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council on November 8th, 2018. The NITRAC discussed issues pertaining to the efficacy of the Emergency Preparedness Evacuation Plan. Chief Schwartz was in attendance at that meeting and spoke to some of those issues. We also had some NITRAC comments pertaining to the visual impacts, including a preference for rockery walls constructed of native materials. That was incorporated into the project conditions of approval. We had already largely captured that in one of the mitigation measures, and then we bolstered it in one of the project conditions of approval. And we also received some comments on limiting the intensity of outdoor lighting. Staff went back, re-reviewed the mitigation measures that we have, determined that they conform to industry standards for residential application with dark skies compliance requirements. That is a condition on the project. It's a mitigation measure, so we didn't make any modifications there. No members of the public spoke at that meeting. Following the NITRAC's discussion, they did take action to recommend approval of the project to your commission on a 6-0 vote. I do have just a couple of brief corrections that I want to note for the record to your report packet. On report packet page 10 of the staff report, the third full paragraph, the reference should be to a plate 102 roadway standard. On page 32 of the staff report, the cited resolution should be attachment D, not attachment C. And then lastly, on the conditions of approval, condition of approval 118 misidentified the date that we expect this to be heard by the Board of Supervisors. That should be April 23rd, 2019, which would put the expiration date of the project, if it's approved, at April 23rd, 2022. So with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission take the following actions and recommend that the Board of Supervisors certify the Alpine Sierra Subdivision Final Environmental Impact Report, which has been prepared pursuant to CEQA, and adopt the Mitigation Monitoring Reporting Plan, supported by and incorporating by reference in its entirety the findings of fact and the errata to the final EIR, included as attachment G to your report packet. There were just, similar to the previous slide, some very minor corrections staff had to make. Adopt a resolution to amend the Alpine Meadows General Plan Land Use Diagram as shown in attachment C to this report, and supported by staff's findings also included in the report. Adopt an ordinance to rezone the Alpine Sierra subdivision project site as shown in attachment D to the report, supported by the findings and staff provided. Approve the Alpine Sierra subdivision vesting tentative subdivision map in accordance with staff's findings, and approve the conditional use permit for the Alpine Sierra planned residential development. All recommendations are based on the respective findings contained in your report. With that, the applicant does have a presentation. They'd like the opportunity to present that. I'll leave it to your wisdom as to whether or not that should be done now, or if you have questions that should be answered first.
Thank you, Alex. Commissioners, any questions before we turn Alex loose?
If I could, Chair, I have a couple of questions for Alex. I don't know how easy it'll be for you, Alex, to get to where it shows the development and how it's connected to the two other adjoining developments, the Bear Creek and the Alpine Meadows.
Is this slide?
Well, if you could show where, I don't know if you have a slide that shows both Bear Creek and Alpine Meadows as it relates to where this project is.
How about we go back to the aerial? Would this work?
Yeah, I think. You're going to have to point a couple of things out for me if you could.
Okay.
One of the issues is, and I know that you'd mentioned they've exhausted every possibility for an EVA. But I'm kind of curious, where was the potential for the EVAs in the adjoining developments or through the Forest Service area? Can you point those out?
Sure. Let me actually, I think I'll be better served by using this map. So if the so this is what I would call, in effect, and let's go forward to alternative B. I think that's better. So this here is listed as an EVA to the Forest Service property to the east here. It's effectively a reservation of an EVA that the applicant is agreeing to construct and provide as an opportunity in the event that at some point in the future the Forest Service would determine to allow access over their property for the county or the county and the Forest Service together to construct a loop road out the other side of Alpine Meadows. I think the reality is that's a long shot.
Right.
As far as a connection to Bear Creek, the alternative plan would have extended this Court C roadway down like this and looped back and connected into John Scott Trail somewhere down about right here, I believe it was.
So there is a roadway back in there?
There is no roadway. There was a proposal. The applicant can speak to it in much better detail, but I believe there's been multiple efforts to obtain access from the adjoining neighbor here, and the most recent one was during the project review back in, I want to say it was 2014, 2015, and ultimately it required a supermajority vote of the Bear Creek Association HOA, and they were unable to achieve it.
If that was constructed, where would that John Scott Trail, where would it come out? Where would it connect to some roadway?
Let's go back to this aerial. Folks who have better knowledge of this will correct me, I'm sure, but I believe it would have followed, I want to say, is this Big John Road? Somebody tell me. This roadway here that comes off John Scott. It would have.
I'm president of the Bear Creek Association, so.
Thank you, Rochelle.
So John Scott Trail is right here, so it is a road that does connect. We are a private HOA, so we do actually have about down here a gate between us and the county-maintained roads of Alpine Meadows Estate. So what the proposal was to come in about down in this area.
So the upper part would not be open for an EVA, at the very top part that you first mentioned up above. You said there's a gate up there?
So we have a gate between what we maintain as our own private roads and the county maintained roads that do get open during emergencies of, avalanche times.
Okay.
But, so they would be accessing and evacuating through our homeowners association.
Okay.
Was the all of these are on, here's the Alpine Meadows main
Right,
road.
right.
So, in the case of a major fire, we would open up that gate and try to, if we were all trying to evacuate out of the valley is down, going out towards Highway 89, we'd be going that direction.
Can you please give us your name for the record,
Sorry,
please?
Rochelle Latimer.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd just soon work through Alex now
Yeah.
if I can, so thank you for
Yeah, I
that.
just
Right,
wanted to
appreciate the
clarify that.
clarification, because I guess the point that I'm getting at is it seems like there would be some benefit to the adjoining developments, because if Alpine Meadows Road got a fire that blocked them up higher up, there is also a potential to maybe come down through this development. So it seemed like there might be a multiple benefits, but I didn't know how the connection point was going to be, because that, the EVA is a big deal.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to ask
and
about that.
from the perspective of evacuation, certainly
Right.
it would be a benefit.
Right.
While he's on that subject, if I might, Mr. Chairman, reminisce just a little bit, back in 1982, 85, I guess it was, we had a little avalanche in Alpine Meadows in the middle of a late evening. And there was no, and of course, the road was absolutely blocked coming in, and there was no access to get into the lodge. And as it turns out, I was a county supervisor at the time, and I happened to go into the Public Works Department with another supervisor to discuss some issues there. And the call came in from Howard Cornell that they'd had an avalanche. Well, he says, we gotta get in here somehow. Well, I was fortunate enough to have my own snowcat. So I was able to go, I couldn't go down the Truckee River from where I live, but I was able to go around through Truckee, come up the highway, park at the junction of Alpine Meadows Road and the highway with a truck and trailer, and bring a snowcat, and I came up that very way.
Yep.
And that was the only way that there was access. And I don't think that should ever be blocked. I don't care who owns it. From my perspective, that is an emergency access. I understand they don't want the everyday traffic going through there, but I think it's an absolute necessity that other access be maintained for emergency use, because that's the only other way in there. And as it turned out, it was the only way in and out. In fact, I was the only one able to, because the snowcat I had was narrow enough to go over the bridge up next to the parking area at Alpine. And otherwise, there'd have been totally no way in and out for anyone. So I think for the sake of fellow human beings, there's got to be some give and take here a little bit. That I'm not expecting that area be opened up for public driving through on Sunday. But it has to be made available for fire and for avalanche issues, no matter what. I'm sorry, that's got one thing that's got to be solved here somehow today, at least on my plate, because I've been through it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And understand and appreciate your comments, and just I'll note that the applicant, when they build that HOA facility, they are planning on purchasing and having a snowcat there specifically for use during emergency situations.
I would just to finish on Larry's comments, obviously, I think I can understand adjoining developments having concerns about potential traffic that this might cause, but, with knock boxes at these emergency, these EVAs, that can control that from happening, that this is just specifically for emergency purposes. So the other question that I had in showing the examples of the types of structures, both the residential structures and the lodge itself, or the homeowner's building, still, they talked about hardening these against fire beyond the standards. And I still see a lot of wood in both, in all of the structures, which, I think of wood that burns, so.
So I'll defer, I'll answer briefly and defer to Chief Conradson and Chief Schwartz to address this in more detail. But Chapter 7A of the building code does allow for use of wood. Wood can be treated. The emergency preparedness evacuation plan for this project would not allow for wood as a siding. You'd have to use cementitious board, stone, other concrete products. You could use wood timbers. Timbers are generally not as susceptible to ignition because of their density. Yeah. So here, this is probably a cedar-sided home.
Yeah.
It's an example of the architectural character.
I can appreciate that, but I mean,
not
I'm just
necessarily
looking
the
if this
exact
is what they're
finished
going
materials.
for. I was just concerned about the fire and them talking about having a harden it against fire, and the lodge, the same case. It was also seemed to have a lot of wood exterior to it. So anyway, that's just my point. So thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, another question. Any opportunity for emergency access adjacent to the water tank? Having walked on the site, it appeared that you could have access.
Unfortunately, no. I had a recent follow-up discussion with the applicant just about that very issue. And due to the steepness of slopes, and because this is an area that receives a lot of snow, there's issues with how steep roadways can be for service from fire equipment. And I believe the maximum grade allowance by the serving fire agency is around 10–11%. And that roadway just, it would, you'd have to endlessly zigzag it up to get up to that point.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Alex. If the applicant would like to come up now, it would be a good time.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes providing some background on the property. For the record, my name is Chris Nelson. My wife and I, Barbara and Chris Nelson, have owned this property since December of 1997. We acquired it with two other couples and have owned it since. So my goal is just to provide a little bit of background on the history and touch a little bit more on some of the points you just made about our efforts to obtain access easements from the Forest Service and from Bear Creek through some efforts we made unsuccessfully. And I should also point out that I live in Portland, Oregon now, but between 1995 and 1999, we lived in Reno and had a cabin at Bear Creek Association. And so we've owned this property for quite a while. It's been an adventure, to say the least. But I think from the get-go, our idea and intent for the property was to effectively develop something like what we enjoyed about Bear Creek, but with less density, that was safer, and still had all the wonderful access to the outdoor amenities that Alpine Meadows has. And Alex talked through with a lot more detail, but I think one of those principles was open space. Our project provides over 2.5 times the open space that's required by the county. And we see that as an amenity, not just something that should make the neighbors feel better. I think that's what's special about Alpine. And over this 21 years, we've worked in earnest with both Alpine Springs County Water District and different chiefs at North Tahoe Fire with a goal to not only make the project fire safe, but to have our project make the surrounding community safer. And we knew that that was going to be an important thing to accomplish to be able to ultimately get the support of this body and the Board of Supervisors. That relationship's been going on 18 years with a couple different water district managers and a handful of different fire chiefs. I'm a developer by training. That's what I do for a living in Portland, Oregon. I'm more urban in my focus, and so in this particular case, and I'll talk quickly about the team of consultants we engaged, but this is a special, unique piece of property that required a different team. But one thing that I've always done in my projects, and we've done this in spades on this project, is neighborhood outreach. We've had a constructive, although not necessarily in agreement, on a number of things. Rochelle and I have known each other now for a few years, and while we have a different point of view on things, I'd say our relationship with Bear Creek has been cordial and professional. We've had countless meetings over 20 years with individual property owners, the board. My wife and I attended an annual meeting once to explain our project intent. We built a model at the expense of $25,000 to show different development scenarios. Some were high-density condos, a lodge, a number of different ideas. And maybe most importantly, once we realized that, we weren't going to be able to enlist the support of our neighbors. We just decided let's pursue a project that's smart, that responds to neighborhood concerns, but still recognizes that we have a right to develop our property. We did take a one-year detour with BCA. Doug Clyde, who will meet shortly, myself, and a subset of the Bear Creek Association spent about a year evaluating what I would call the BCA alternative. It would have eliminated the road connection between the project, the lower part and the upper part. And we would have joined, it was kind of pointed out already, I don't think we need to point that out again, but we would have effectively contributed a significant amount of economic numeration, but the big part of the property where the 28 home sites would have become part of BCA. In exchange, we would have not built the connecting road, and there would have been access. And as Alex pointed out, while there was a lot of community support for that, it didn't get enough support to move forward, and we ended up repivoting, if you will. But what did come out of that, we tried to listen, and our density, not only did the staff have concerns about the density and the environmental impacts in certain areas, BCA certainly did as well, particularly in the western pod, where we've gone from 20 single-family residential units, 14 half-plexes, 6 small lot cabins, to 10. We incorporated that. High-quality architectural standards, dark skies lighting, more open space, open door to our trail system. All those things were important and are still encapsulated in our project. I've also met with the Chalet Townhome group, Alpine Estates, and Juniper Mountain over the years. Stanford Alumni Association was a neighbor, and some of you may have remembered we actually, Doug, Clyde, and I worked on behalf of Stanford to entitle that for a townhome project, which happened in May of 2016. We've done a lot of an extensive public agency outreach. The Alpine Board, as I mentioned, North Tahoe Fire Protection District, the Sheriff's Office around a proposal we made to the U.S. Forest Service for emergency vehicle access points at the lower portion of the property and at the upper portion of the property where the water district has an easement and a water line. So there would have been a point at the top and the bottom. And Larry, to your point, there was in the general plan a vision and an idea of a loop road at one point. So we thought not only could that be an opportunity to make our project safer, but in the event of a situation like you talked to, it would provide that sort of bypass road. Unfortunately, the U.S. Forest Service doesn't allow the granting of easements when there is legal access, which we have off of Alpine Meadows Road. So the Division Ranger, Joanne, unfortunately rejected that proposal in 2011. More recently, there were some concerns about the potential of the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog. We had a consultation on site with representatives U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and proactively did some survey work, and that was elective, again, but something that we wanted to later make sure there wasn't going to be a significant impact. Alex touched on it most recently, but we did have three meetings with the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council as another form of outreach, and did receive their support and recommendation on November 8th. I've got a few of our consultants here today, but we really believe we've got a best-in-class team. Larry Haywood, as many of you may know, has been an avalanche expert in the region for many years. Adrienne Graham is here. She prepared the emergency preparedness and evacuation plan for Martis as well as Squaw Valley. And she collaborated with Doug Clyde, who you'll meet shortly, on ours. Patrick Longden with TLA Planning and Engineering is here today, our civil engineer. Sarah Haughey, importantly, our transportation consultant, did all the traffic modeling. She couldn't make it today, but has responded to certain concerns. Dale Cox, regional architect, helped us develop the architectural standards. And we have, Doug has engaged Bob Moore at times to also, Bob's a former snow ranger in the area and was a resource on some matters. So I'm going to introduce shortly Doug Clyde, who's the owner of Mountain Resort Consulting. He's been working with us since 2001. He happens to also be an elected official and county council member in Summit County, Utah, which includes the Park City area. The reason for hiring Doug was he's got an extensive amount of experience in mountain planning and design, dealing with a lot of the issues that we've had to deal with in this particular location. And he also happened to have had a history working at Alpine Meadows as a management person. Importantly, he was also retained by North Tahoe Fire to help them with a shelter-in-place program at Homewood. I did want to also emphasize, Alex talked about it, these are home sites. We are not going to build the homes, but there are very tight architectural standards, and there are very specific requirements about how the homes are going to be sited in steep terrain, and these are just some cross sections and maybe examples that'll show where we're not going to be grading a lot of the lots in sensitive areas. Doug Clyde and Dale Cox and his team spent a lot of time doing specific site planning work on several of those lots. And that's just maybe one example of how a home could sit on a steep lot with little disruption to the paths. So I'm going to stop there and introduce Doug Clyde. We would like to also, if possible, to reserve time after the comment period to address further questions if there are any from our technical team that are available. And I should say, it may seem a little corny, I put the be prepared thing there. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I've always believed that being prepared for things you might not expect is an important thing to do. And I think as we looked at this project, it wasn't just can we make our own community safe, but how can we help the overall community? And are there opportunities for community benefit in this project that'll go outside of our project boundaries? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Before you sit down, is there any questions from the commission?
Yeah, I do have one question for you, Chris. When you were turned down in 2011 by the Forest Service for using that as your EVA, was it just on a local basis that you dealt with? Did you try to move up of the local basis to try to see if there's an exception to be made?
No, and that's because there's a federal code that she responded to in the letter that she cited. So I did not. No. But I should say it was importantly, prior to Chief Schwartz coming on board, a former fire chief had required that as part of our will serve, we grant to future potential easements so that our doors are open to our adjoining neighbors in the future. So that's the problem we encountered ultimately with the Bear Creek exploration, is that we needed their support within the association to be able to get that easement. And it would have been an evacuation only, not a, well, there was one area that would have had a connection point for traffic. And unfortunately that created concerns about traffic, legitimately so, I think, with the Alpine Estates Association next door, because all of a sudden there would have been another project entry that would have generated traffic to that lower portion. So, we continue to have, this is set up as a requirement in North Tahoe Fire from a long time ago to make sure that our doors are open should there be a change of policy with the Forest Service in the future. And unfortunately, we couldn't move that policy.
Right. I can understand that may have been maybe a hardened policy at that point, but exceptions can be made given the argument, and I think Larry probably has somewhat of an argument given what happened when the incident he was talking about.
Let me ask you, are you under the jurisdiction of the Basin Forest Service or the Truckee Ranger Station?
Truckee.
Truckee. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
For me?
Not for me.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to that discussion. At the time that came up, my background, I have a long history in Alpine Meadows and dealing with the Truckee Ranger District, and we hired a consultant who was, a 25-year veteran and did that permitting work exactly to try and help us through that permitting. And he was very clear that the way the federal code read, that if you have one point of access, they will not, and that's will not, provide you with a second point of access onto your land. So I think it's something that we should all pursue. Larry, you're absolutely right. It was 82. I was a manager at Alpine at the time that it happened. And we know what happened. We know what the problems are. That's why we're providing the possibility to connect from both ends of our property but the hurdles in terms of getting that done is something that's beyond our scope at this point. So,
Let me ask a question.
please.
Did you go so far as to identify the route that you would take once you leave the property?
Yeah, we're, again, I worked extensively on that land. I was the person who put in the snowmaking water pipe from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill back decades ago. We know the grades and the terrain very well. And we discussed all that with them, but it just simply, there was no conversation to be had because the Code of Federal Registry, the federal code is very, very clear. One, if you have a point of access, you don't get one from the Forest Service. That's federal legislation. So it's, again, I hope for everybody's benefit in the future that we can revisit that at some time. And we have allowed that to be done, but in the current state of affairs, the answer is no.
What would be the trigger?
The trigger would be a change of federal code.
Well, that's not likely, so you're saying that it won't happen.
Well, no, I'm saying we're allowing it to happen because we're stubbing roads out and making them available for EVA. And I think there is the possibility that with sufficient effort on the part of life safety providers and the county itself that perhaps something could be done. But again, the code currently is quite clear, unfortunately.
Okay,
So-
well, we may be able to talk about that later.
Yeah, no. Sorry for that diversion to begin with. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to spend a minute on. Excuse me, I have to change my glasses here so I can read what I'm written. I wanted to spend a little minute about who I am and how we got here with our current plan, and this is mostly about life safety. I've been doing land planning and entitlement work in mountain resort communities for a little over 30 years now. And because of the environments that I practice in, virtually all of my projects require mitigation above and beyond the code requirements in order to receive life safety approvals. And I'm talking everything from a handful of single-family residents to a 1 million square foot hotel that I developed on the end of a dead-end road. In addition to my private practice, I've served for 6 years as a planning commissioner in Summit County, and now I'm in my 3rd year as a county council person. So now I administer the fire code as well as practice it. Of course, when I know that means nothing to Larry because I don't think I was at drinking age when you were first a commissioner. So, but I'm trying. So, in addition to this, I've also worked for agencies as a consultant over the years. In particular, due to my work with the North Tahoe Fire Protection District on the Alpine Meadows project, I was selected by North Tahoe Fire to write the life safety plan for the Homewood Resort. As many of you may know, Homewood got blocked in court because they had done what was considered to be an insufficient analysis of, or a less than robust analysis of their evacuation possibilities. And Homewood is, like most of Tahoe, or much of Tahoe, it can be very problematic for evacuation. As you know, in either direction, you have roads that have literally tree canopy that touch, virtually touch on both sides for miles and miles and miles. So the approach that I received my direction from North Tahoe Fire was that we were going to develop a very robust shelter-in-place program because evacuation was likely to be infeasible, if not hazardous, at times. And so that was the plan that we developed. That was the plan that was part of the settlement for the Homewood lawsuit, and it is now the requirements of Homewood. But what I wanted to say with that is that all of the technical aspects that we brought to bear on Homewood, which would potentially contain thousands of people at one time, we have used in the Alpine Sierra development. So I would have to say that it is, beyond a question, probably the most highly evolved defensible space shelter-in-place plan that that the county, perhaps even the country, has seen. So with that as background, I'd like to quickly go through a few of the slides that detail the mitigation. The obvious first thing is that one of the inherent things about dispensable space is that you are not only trying to prevent the forest fire from moving into your building, you're also preventing the fire in your building from moving into the forest. And this is why I think when Chief Schwartz speaks later, you'll see that the conclusion is that our plan actually makes the valley safer than it is currently without our development. We, of course, have, again, extensive defensible space. I won't linger on this stuff. In spite of the renderings, we are required to use non-combustible materials on the exterior of the buildings. They will be fire-hardened buildings. Some of the cementatious materials, however, do have reasonable resemblance to wood, and they will be used. The other thing that we've done, which is unique now to Tahoe, is we have developed the early warning system that you heard Alex talk about a little bit earlier. This is the first. It's hardwired to the North Tahoe fire station and then broadcasted in Alpine Meadows. And so they can give very specific instructions to those people immediately. And again, as noted, these are tone-operated systems. They send out a tone. That speaker comes on in the house that is qualified to receive that tone, and they then get instructions. Beyond the early warning system, we also have an area of refuge that is accessible to all, and we'll get to that in a little more detail later. And then on top of that, we have, again, a very robust on-site shelter building that is completely fireproof, has filtered air, and is probably in some of the best cleared defensible space location that you can imagine. So is this the clicker?
That is.
I'll have to reach your, maybe this might be beyond my skills. Yeah.
On the right, there's an arrow.
Oh, okay, the right arrow. There we go. There we go. Now, all of this has resulted, of course, in a will serve letter from North Tahoe Fire. And by issuing that will serve letter, they have also essentially deemed that our mitigation is greater than or equal to that which is provided in the code, right? That is something that is at the discretion of the fire marshal, and we have worked, of course, very diligently with them to get to that point. And this is probably, I'd say at least my 10th go around in this sort of issue with various fire departments, always with buildings because of the difficulty of the sites that we're building on, because we're in the mountains, because we're trying to get pushed up against ski slopes, all the rest of that stuff. It is rare, if not unusual, for us to have 2 points of access, or even to meet basic fire department access distances, 150 feet to all ends of the building, et cetera. So again, Chief Schwartz can speak to that in greater detail, but I believe that is what is characterized in that approval. Again, we're of course, the new homes are going to meet California 7A requirements, and we've also added additional mitigation beyond that comes out of the WUI. The WUI is a national code that has sort of been partially adopted by California. You know the way California does codes. They don't take the whole code. They take what they like. But the WUI provides for additional defensible space requirements over and above what are currently in 7A of the California code. So we are, to some degree, again, sort of above and beyond. And then as a matter of both safety and aesthetics, all propane tanks will be underground. And again, the dedicated easement that we've been on at some length. So here's a slide that I now see. This is the, there we go. This is the location of the repeater antenna that Alex talked about. Here is what the repeaters actually look like, and or the receivers, and I believe that the fire department has brought out some examples of that. It is likely that it'll hit most of the homes in the Alpine Meadows Valley. So if other people want to participate, they just have to buy the box. And then lastly, this is a detail of our shelter in place and our HOA building and our maintenance building, the available parking, the fact that these are hardened structures, that they, of course, are completely non-combustible. I also wanted to mention, by the way, that in addition to providing sprinklers inside the house, which is a requirement of 7A, we provide sprinklers in the eaves of our residents, because what we now know about wildland fires and how they invade residential communities, it is mostly through ember transfer. It's embers that are that of course sometimes go out, hundreds if not thousands of feet in front of the fire, and then get sucked up into the attic of the adjacent building. And we, 20 years ago we didn't understand that, but now the National Fire Protection Agency has studied that, life-size models, and they understand the ember transfer, and they understand how to prevent it. So again, sprinklers on eaves, something that comes back to a fire that I experienced some 30 years ago, 25 years ago, in Deer Valley, in which a cold roof caught fire in a lodge. And they poured 2 million gallons of water on it, and it took them 3 days to put it out. It involved a lot of chainsaws, and simply because they didn't understand the importance of protecting the roof zone in a building. So we know all that now. I think this is really, last slide here is just showing that we have, of course, both an evacuation route down the valley, and as well as an evacuation route to our shelter-in-place structures. But then also, now I'm going to have to get out the actual written part of this so I can read it to you. But also, we are tagging on to the 2005 Alpine County Water District Wildfire Protection Plan. And in that plan, they show in the parking lots here, they show an area of refuge. And in that plan, they tell people that, yes, sometimes you will try and go out the Alpine Meadows Road, but if you can't go out the Alpine Meadows Road, then this is a perfectly safe area of refuge. We again had that analyzed further by our own expert, Mr. Bob Moore, ex-Forest Service firefighter, and concluded that in our report as well. And I'd just like to take read a couple of brief lines out of this 2005 plan. It says, many wildfire-related deaths have occurred when victims were trapped by fire in their vehicles while trying to escape on narrow community roads. North Tahoe Fire Protection District desired alternative is that all homes within a community have effective defensible space, allowing residents to shelter in place during a fire event. This is back in 2005. This is not something we just made up. This is 15-plus-year-old. How do we get there from here? We get there by designing better communities, by designing to higher codes, and by having robust fire standards. And so in summary, I just want to let you know, I just want to mention to you that we have within our project, of course, the shelter-in-place option, in two forms. First of all, many of these homes will be designed to a standard that you could survive a fire inside of your home. We then have also the shelter-in-place facility, that again is a hardened facility. We have the area of refuge that is defined in the 2005 Alpine Meadows County Water District Plan, and that is literally within walking distance of some of these homes, although you can certainly also drive there. And then finally, we have a very robust communication system that will give those residents the most direct and the most immediate information from the life safety providers as to whether evacuation is advisable or not. And with that, I would conclude my remarks and happy to take any questions if you like.
Questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think maybe it might be wise, I know that some of the written comments we've received have had expressed concerns regarding fire issues and that. I'm sure people here have those concerns also. Maybe before we open it up to public comment, we could invite the fire service representatives up to speak with us. And take it from there.
Good morning. My name is Todd Conrads, and I'm the fire marshal for North Tahoe Fire. And the topics were covered really well by the applicant, Doug Clyde, and everything they said is stuff that we've discussed at length, trying to find the best way to promote fire safety and fire-resistant construction in order to achieve a shelter-in-place community. Those kind of communities do exist. There's some in Southern California where fires can go through and the homes still standing, all the people are safe, no need to evacuate. It's always going to be difficult to try to evacuate from Tahoe anyway with narrow roads and so many people. The big thing here, and I'd like to invite Eric up, is that with the construction, there's also the fuels management for this whole development. Between the two, seems to be kind of nervous there, I don't know why. The fuels management aspect combined with the construction together is what can allow fire to go through a neighborhood and have all these buildings still stand. So because the fuels is one of the most important aspects, I'll let Eric speak to that. And then if you have questions, I can talk about that communication system.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Eric Hornbeck, North Tahoe Fire. I'm working as their Forest Fuels Coordinator and Defensible Space Inspector. Born and raised down the hill in Reno. I've been in Tahoe area for a while too. I worked for the Tahoe National Forest before coming over here in wildland fire, so well versed in both aspects. Just piggybacking on what Chief Conrads had said, is the applicant has done a great job. I mean, with the environmental impact report and also with the forest management and fuel reduction plan, the forester did a great job. I mean, he nailed it. He nailed the accurate site descriptions, type 10 fuel loadings, and he put together a really, really strong prescription that it secures that, we're going to be doing the right thing. I mean, multiple objectives, fuel reduction efforts, and also forest health goals. And so just to highlight a few of those, as far as defensible space goes, I mean, almost, you saw the map, it was all blue. Almost the whole site's being managed as defensible space. So it's going to be complete compliance with Public Resource Code 4291. Also, within the structure protection zone, specifically the first 30 to 100 feet of homes, we're going to be looking for a canopy separation as well. So 10 feet branch tip to branch tip separation between trees, taking out some of the understory, all of that as well. And we're also going to be wanting to do annuals out there. We want to go through and do fuel hazards, hazard tree assessments, and defensible space evaluations on an annual basis. Make sure everything's staying where it needs to be, staying in check. And there's also already been efforts with the stewardship agreement with the Forest Service to allow areas. We want 200 feet of defensible space, so twice as much as what's written in the Public Resource Code. And so as the project progresses, and their structures on site, that is the time that the Forest Service would be able to facilitate that stewardship agreement, which would allow the homeowners in the community to perform defensible space actions outwards onto Forest Service lands as well. So that kind of covers all the defensible space pieces. There's also going to be concurrent forest fuels management and fuels reduction through each phase. And the way we're looking at it is we want the fuel reduction done. We want that, any trees that need to be removed, brush needs to be removed. We want that stuff done before sticks go up. So that's the concurrent planning we've been looking at. And then making sure that before the project even starts, so before phase A goes through, anywhere where there's extreme fuel loading, extreme hazard tree issues, snags, things like that, we want all those mitigated before. And so that's stuff that the applicant's all on board with, just making sure that they have their workers in a safe work environment, and we're already starting to mitigate some of the potential fire hazards that are on site before buildings even go in. And to keep this all rolling, it's written in our agreement as well that the HOA is going to be responsible for all ongoing compliance and maintenance. So they're going to have a plan that even after it's built, they're going to have us back there for those annual inspections, and they're going to stay working as stewards of the land to meet multi-objective fuel reduction and forest management goals. We want it to be very safe fuel reduction, but we also want to maintain, a very resilient, healthy forest ecosystem as well. Support the wildlife, support the native species, enhance the riparian zones, remove some of the conifers out of the encroaching aspen areas. We want to make it just a model community of what the forest should look like and what a fire-safe neighborhood looks like.
Question? Is these same standards apply to the Bear Creek subdivision?
So defensible space standards, yeah, they apply to everyone in California. I mean, specifically, we looked at just accentuating out the 200 feet requirements just to enhance the shelter-in-place type community. The WUI Chapter 7A and Type 1A building codes. We're just trying to really compile everything in to make this a true shelter-in-place environment. There's a research scientist. He's actually he worked for the Forest Service. His name's Dr. Jack Cohen. A lot of people that have worked in these agencies have probably seen some of his work. He's put out countless numbers of scholarly articles, and they all have to do with home ignition. I mean, they'll do full-size homes in a lab, lofting embers on them, taking full ground fires through homes, and seeing what the issue is. And the issue is exactly like they already nailed it. 80% of these homes that are burning in, conflagration-type wildland fires are from ember intrusion. So the building construction is the biggest part, and then treating the defensible space on that reduces the amount of ignitions you can have at the home site. So if you're not having ignitions within the home, great. And also, he actually released a specific statement that says the flames you'd see coming off a large, high-intensity crown fire have no impact on even wood siding from 200 feet away. So if you can create an environment with 200 feet of defensible space where at most you would have a very, very low intensity surface fire that's actually doing a lot of good for the environment there, then you're not even getting yourself in to direct flame contact. You're just really focused on the embers, and that's exactly what the shelter-in-place type construction is really focused on too. So,
is the stewardship agreement with the Forest Service, has that been through their process, the environmental process, and they've agreed to it?
No. So what happened with the stewardship agreement is they have them in place. So currently with the Forest Service, if I go out to a single home and I deem maybe they need more defensible space, I recommend it on an individual basis to homeowners. They can usually call out a forester or a fuels tech from their local Forest Service, and they'll come out. Simple. They basically fill out a one piece of paper that's a stewardship agreement. They go out and talk about what they want to remove. Remove these smaller age class trees, take some lighter fuels, remove some pockets of shrubs, create some islanding. So they get a quick overview to meet the Forest Service objectives as well. And the previous forester working for North Tahoe Fire, Mike Vollmer, he reached out to the Forest Service, started the conversation. And essentially with the agreement, is the development needs to be in place. So, we're going to be enforcing the existing defensible space fuel reduction treatments on the site. And then as they have structures in place, there would be a time then to come back with the Forest Service and establish a form of a master service agreement, which would just encompass Alpine Sierra as a whole. It would allow anywhere where you need to get, say, up to 200 feet of defensible space, you're allowed to do X on this Forest Service land.
And that would require the environmental work and everything at that time?
There probably wouldn't be any additional environmental work. They already have a complete environmental impact report, and the Forest Service already does the stewardship agreement program.
But on the local basis, they'd still have to,
Yeah, it'd be on site, so they'd have to make sure everything concurs. Not exactly if Tahoe National Forest does it the exact same way as the LTBMU, but on site with the local district LTBMU, they come out, they already have it done. It's a simple one-page form. They're creating defensible space, so it already meets, CEQA exemptions and is all within Forest Practice Act. So.
okay, well, it sounds like there's a lot of compatibility with the Forest Service, but you haven't been able to make any headway with the evacuation road, or whatever it is called?
Chief, can you speak a little more to that one?
Correct. Chief Schwartz can address some of that.
Oh, you got to get to the microphone.
That's correct. What the applicant described to you, we were looking at Good Shepherd agreements and things for fuel reduction, but the secondary access is not an option through the Forest Service, at least not at this time. We could continue to pursue that. We all agree that that's the best thing to have, but their rules, we don't really have much influence over that.
Well, it appears that the policy really applies to a single property owner, where they want to have a secondary road over, or they have one access, but they want another access. And so the policy deals with that, wondering why the National Forest should be encumbered for two accesses to the property. But at any rate, it seems, is this a community interest, or is this just a property interest?
I think anywhere in the evacuation routes, it's a community interest. We don't know where the fire is going to start. Depending on where that is, it's nice to have two ways out for that very reason. If it starts at the bottom and everybody's up at the top, even at Bear Creek that can't get out from the bottom, maybe the exit's around through the top. All of those different access routes make a big difference in people's ability to escape the fire. We're in total agreement with you guys with having secondary access, and we'll do what we can to pursue that, not just for this development, but everything within the valley that we feel is beneficial to the communities.
Well, the question that comes up in my mind is, if you're just talking about the one property owner and one property, I can see where the policy is pretty clear, but if there's a community reason, then that may open up another door.
That's true, and I think if the other subdivisions could benefit from that by going through this project, I think it is a community benefit.
Yeah.
We totally agree.
So at any rate, I guess what I'm saying is I would encourage, further discussions on this topic rather than just relying on the code to change, because that's never going to happen. But
You're
if
right.
you
I
have
like
a discussion from a community standpoint about the importance of, an evacuation route that would go through national forest land, then that becomes a community and not just a property. So, that's one thing to think about. And just to drop it at this point seems like it's premature, just because one ranger said you can't do it. That's kind of something to think about.
You make a great point. No, I agree with that. And in fact, when the fire comes, whether it's the Forest Service, local government, CAL FIRE, we're all in that same thing together, and we're all seeking those same interests. And if the best way to prevent loss of life is through someone else's property, Forest Service, I totally agree. That's something that we should pursue, and we won't give up on that for anywhere in the areas that we serve if we can find better means of egress for people to escape fire.
Okay. Thank you.
On this particular project, we've done the best we can with hardening structures, exceeding all of the fire codes, whether it's Public Resource Code, the SRA, Fire Safe Regulations, Fire Code, our amended code, the Placer County Code. All of those with the combination of the fuels management, we're trying to achieve a true shelter-in-place community, and that's the best that we can do so far. But you make a great point, and I think we should keep it on our radar to continue working with the Forest Service and SRA land, too, to get access for people to get out.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of issues that you need to deal with the Forest Service, so
Yep.
that relationship should be pretty strong, I would think.
It is. We actually have a really good working relationship with all of our other fire agency partners.
Yeah,
up here.
the documents imply not, but,
Yeah, policies, everybody has their own, I suppose, but
Okay.
yeah, you're right. You know, if you have questions, I brought up a little prop. It's hard to tell on some of these pictures. If you'd like, I can touch briefly on the information system that's going to be available up there. One of the things that we found out through some of these devastating fires and the loss of life is the people that were trapped within their vehicles, and it was mostly because of lack of notification. Early warning made a big difference. A lot of the people up in Santa Rosa, Sonoma, in that area, fire descended upon them at night, and it was the last minute where they got that notification. Some of the communication systems that were in place, whether it's Nixle or any of those kinds, the cell phone notifications, the reverse 911, Everbridge, all of those ones, not all of them were functional. This particular thing, it's actually made by Federal Signals. There's several of these types of devices that are out there. However, it utilizes the same kind of infrastructure that we use for our communications in emergencies. We get toned out at stations, they relay our dispatch information. We have the ability to do that now, and it all started with this particular development. And they're the ones that are putting in the initial infrastructure in order to provide the radio systems to where, just like our stations, they can get toned out, and we are speaking to them live, giving them instructions. And we're not relying on outside communications, cell towers and things that often get taken out. A lot of them haven't been proven to be that reliable, and we were pretty excited with implementing this particular idea because we think it's something that's as reliable as the same communications that we use. And the other benefit is we like seeing it available to everybody in the valley. The infrastructure here is going to be brought on by this project, the transmitter site, with cooperation of Alpine Meadows, the water district. And for us to have that ability, we can actually put it in everybody's house in the valley. Our radio techs have already scoped out the area for coverage on that. And the vast majority, if not all, of Alpine Meadows can be covered by that very thing. We'll have access from our stations or the fire control room at their Type 1A building, their shelter-in-place building, the lodge. And we think that that's, we're hoping that that will be a model to implement early warning notifications throughout all of our district. We have other areas with canyons, isolated somewhat, with limited access out of there. And we're thinking that this could be the first of many of these types of systems that we'd like to put in within our district. We view that as a huge plus, and that's associated with this particular project. So evacuation has always been an issue. I'll let Chief Schwartz speak to that one, but I'm happy to answer any questions on code, access, or the communication systems if you have any. Yeah.
You mentioned that communities, in-place communities, had actually gone through an experienced fire and survived. Where were those?
Correct. There's actually a few of them that had several fires, and this is one particular one with a flyer that actually started these conversations with the applicant for the shelter in place. And these are in Southern California, as you guys probably are aware. Southern California is very prone to fire as well. And Eric's more familiar with some of these communities and exactly the type of fuel models and stuff were there, but fuels down in Southern California are pretty flammable. We've had devastating fires down there as well. What you're seeing here is a flyer of one community that has experienced fires with some pretty flammable vegetation within there. Fire went all the way around it, and all the homes were still standing. They didn't need to impact all of the access roads out of there, clogging up all the highways and everything else. And that's why the comments that were made way back from the district, it'd be nice if we could have the ability to have shelter-in-place communities with that much hardening of the structures with a combination of fuel reduction to where we could have true shelter-in-place communities. So that's one of them. Do you want to speak to any more?
So Rancho Santa Fe Fire Protection District has
There you
a,
go.
so yeah, that pamphlet covers Rancho Santa Fe Fire Protection District has a total of 5 communities highlighted in there that are all listed as shelter-in-place communities. So when you go on their website and you look through their evacuation, they have a blurb that says, if you live in these 5 communities, you're in a shelter-in-place community. You know, listening to your dispatch, obviously, if we can get you out in an early evacuation, it's timely, you're gonna have access and you can get out. That's the safest bet. But you can also rest assured knowing that if you have to stay in an event, you're still in a community that's gonna look like the cover of the page. You know, that's a tall, live oak chaparral type cover that burns really hot, really intense. And all homes in that are just sitting beautifully, so same goals.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, one other question. The communication system, I know on a previous project we heard about avalanches. Would that also be used in the wintertime for avalanche warnings?
Absolutely. In fact, this is can be used for any type of emergency, whether it's avalanche, not to go down an Alpine Meadows road. It can even be used by law enforcement. Like I said, this infrastructure is can be supported just like all of our communications, and this is available to Placer County OES, state OES, I imagine, if they wanted to get in on that, but it'd probably be accessed through us. But Placer County Sheriffs, Placer County OES, and North Tahoe Fire can relay any information and instructions to anybody with those within their home for any type of emergency or emergency communications.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
EJ, how many people do we have signed up that wish to speak?
Right now I have 6 folks.
Okay. All right. And then, Chief, are you?
Yeah, I'm wandering my way up here.
All right, thank you.
How are you? Well, good, it's still morning, right? Good morning. Mike Schwartz, Fire Chief for North Tahoe Fire, Alpine Meadows, and Meeks Bay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about evacuation because I think that's most people's concerns given what's happened in the last couple of years in California, right? Yourselves included. I didn't really come prepared with a presentation, but I tried to shoot one to the IT guys with a couple of slides to make it more fun than looking at me. But I just want to talk about this project really shortly, and then I'll talk a little bit about kind of what you've heard my staff work on. My staff's better briefed on this specific project than I am. I will tell you, though, from the beginning, I've been involved with Chris Nelson, and with Doug Clyde. I've walked this project myself. And I think that what we've done with the county and the designers is this is as safe as you can make a project in Alpine Meadows. Safer than anything else there. And it is certainly non-exacerbation, which is a threshold that's been asked. This project is designed to be shelter in place. Right above this project is the Alpine Meadows parking lot, which is a great safety zone. A little bit about my background. I've been here 40 years. I've been the fire chief of the North Tahoe Fire District for almost 7. I came from Incline Village for 30 years. I've been in Angora, I've been in Waterfall, I've been burned over twice, I've been to Southern California, I've been burned over there. Shelter in place is a viable option. I've done it. I've been in the house, I've had the fire burn through, I've come out to talk about it. So I believe that you guys, especially for Placer County, which has this problem all over your county, this is probably a model for the future. You've probably read Ken Pimlott's letter as he left office, forcing us to really rethink planning. I think you're looking at what rethink planning should look like with everything we know now. A little bit about some of the evacuations in general. The mitigation on the pumper is not just this is not your dad's Oldsmobile, so to speak. These are custom-built engines for our environment, made for the small roads. This project, we insist on large roads. The rest of Alpine Meadows has road problems. Alpine Meadows Road's not great. Bear Creek's the worst. Bear Creek has bridges I can't cross with fire trucks. This project, Bear Creek needs this project to get out. They should find a way to hook into this. This is a 26-foot roadway. It's built to keep their people safe. And I think in most cases, people are going to have to go up. This is not going to exacerbate the problem that exists in Alpine. It's a part of a solution. And I think that from this, everybody else should be able to model. These roadways are large. We can move in and out of them. We will be able to get access. We have great forestry. So kind of to give you a picture of where we see this going. Okay, my next slide. Excuse me. Getting over a cold. Is that a negative? You talked about legislation. Mr. Johnson. I'm intimately involved in legislation, both with the federal government. We are trying, us as local government are trying to work with CAL FIRE and our Forest Service partners on that exact issue. These things don't happen fast, but I agree with you that if we're going to continue to allow developments into the mountains, we need to work with our federal partners, and the North Tahoe Fire is doing that. This project doesn't have the ability to do that at this time. My hope is, just like you heard from my staff, that we will be able to do this with the federal government and with Bear Creek. I think that, I always hope for the best of humans, and that when this project goes in, that they will see that there's benefit to both of them to work out some type of an agreement at that little court that they could potentially hook. I think at the end of the day, though, the people who are in this particular subdivision are going to stay put. I don't picture these people going out. And to talk, next slide, to talk about, next please, keep going, probably one more. We don't want to put people on these roads. So there's two types of evacuation. There's mandatory evacuations, which this you just saw at the campfire, which I've been at. You saw in Calistoga, you got woke up by your neighbor in the middle of the night. You didn't get a warning. Your cell phone didn't work. You didn't get the presidential test didn't come to your phone that night because the cell system didn't have the capacity. Having notification early on mandatory evacuations, whether you're sheltering in place or leaving, is the really only way we're going to save lives. Better is to leave when it's voluntary. That takes preparedness. That means people are prepared to leave when they're notified. When there's a potential issue, long before we're going to congest our roads. When the King Fire approached, we prepared for it. Alpine Meadows was within the target range at the King Fire. I was the fire chief. I looked at all the canyons that I deal with, not just Alpine, but all the ones that preceded Blackwood, Ward, Alpine, all those different canyons, and we looked at doing how much time it would take to do the evacuation. We knew what it would take. We know how long we'd have to anticipate. If we don't get evacuated involuntary, the mandatory, the shelter in place option is better than trying to run down small roads and get trapped in your car. So that's kind of my explanation on that. And basically, I think I'm just going to end there and see if there's any questions on evacuation.
Thank you, Chief. Questions? All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having us.
Commissioner, I think maybe it might be a good time to take a 5-minute break before we open up to public comment. If we could be back here about 12 o'clock.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
You're the boss.
I didn't hear any objections.
No?
No.
You must have to go to the bathroom.
Yes. You ready to get this started again, please?
I guess.
All right. The gavel is back.
All right, thank you all. It's time that we open up the meeting for public comment. Are we ready? Okay. Sue, you have the list?
I do.
Okay, has everybody that wishes to speak had a chance to sign up? Okay, maybe let's call three at a time, and whoever's called first can speak, and two more can line up behind, and we'll just kind of try to move this through. Remember, we are on a timer of about 3 minutes.
Okay, we're going to start with Judy Bruner, Elaine Geffen, and Pete Geffen.
Should I start? Hello, my name is Judy Bruner. Thank you for letting me speak. I've been a homeowner in Alpine Meadows for 20 years. My comments on the project fall in 5 categories. First, entry-exit points. The proposed project does not meet the Placer County Code requiring at least 2 vehicle entry-exit points for adequate circulation and emergency purposes, nor does it meet the state fire-safe regulations, which establish a maximum allowable length for dead-end roads. No practical alternative has been identified by the applicant and the county. Since the proposed project does not meet Placer County and California codes, I ask the Planning Commission to deny the project. Second, trails and roads. The proposed plan creates new 20 and 25-foot trail easements to replace the existing mountain trail. In addition, the map shows a 20-foot EVA easement, which seems to coincide with the new 20-foot trail easement. The EVA easement states that it must be capable of supporting a 75,000-pound load, thus essentially replacing an existing foot trail with a road. The map shows such road having a fire district gate and a dead end right behind existing properties on John Scott Trail, diminishing those property values. What is the purpose of a fire district gate and dead end at the northeast corner of the property? Is there an expectation that this road would at some point be connected to John Scott Trail to solve the one egress issue? This plan should not be approved without providing clarity and transparency to the public on these questions. Third, character of the proposed development. Several aspects of the project are not in character with the mountain communities of Alpine Meadows. 1, 4 and 5 foot sidewalks. 2, the allowance of parking along one side of Court B. 3, a parking lot for at least 12 cars and a swimming pool at the HOA. 4, 28 lots allow executive homes of up to 8,000 square feet, too large for this area, with 5 lots also including secondary dwelling units. Fences, the project defines drainage requirements for fencing. No fencing should be allowed. 5, placement of a street light at Court C due to a design deviation from county standards. The project should adhere to county standards, eliminating the need for a street light. 4th, cumulative impacts. In painstaking detail, the EIR dismisses the incremental cumulative impact of this project on noise, visual resources, hydrology, wildlife, traffic, and other categories. In some cases, the county concludes that the incremental impact of the project is insignificant because the cumulative impact is already significant. For example, the EIR provides data that the noise levels near Alpine Meadows Road are already at or near the maximum allowable level for residential land uses, and essentially concludes that adding a small amount of additional noise shouldn't matter. Using this logic, no project is ever denied, and the county continues to approve projects that significantly impair this area. How much is enough? Alpine Knolls, Alpine Sierra, the Gondola, Gas X Exploders, White Wolf, the Village at Squaw, and so on. No one project is deemed significant, but the cumulative impact is in direct conflict with CEQA's intent relative to cumulative impact. I'm almost done.
We're past the 3-minute mark here.
I'm going to cede my time. Pete Geffen, I'm going to cede my time to Ms. Bruner.
I'm almost done. Fifth, the public benefits of the project. The Development Review Committee defines certain services and improvements to be funded in return for approval of this project. Should the commission approve a project that does not meet the codes because the applicant agrees to pay for infrastructure improvements? In summary, I ask the Planning Commission to demonstrate appropriate governance by adhering to county and state codes and deny this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
What an act to follow. My name's Elaine Geffen, and my husband and I have lived a second home on John Scott Trail for 30 years. And it was about 20 years ago when we started learning about the project. And we heard there was going to be a big development. And of course, you get the NIMBY thing, and you don't want, you know it's going to be noisy, and, you know, 10 or 15 years of big excavating big rocks and all of that. But we also are worried about it's basically, it sounds to me like if you're seeking a project, if the applicant is seeking a project for 20 years, I don't think the land is a good, you can't get the secondary out. You're having a lot of trouble with working with your neighbors and trying to make a good project. I mean, the fire suppression things sound wonderful, and it's the wave of the future. But I still think we're adding density. We have a lot of, if the easement down at John Scott, where Bear Valley, where the gate is, if the easement goes in there, eventually our fear is that it's going to be the construction trucks that come through. And who knows if that's going to happen. We also don't have practical things. How long are these phases going to take? How many, it is a valuable concern as a neighbor, and any of you would feel the same way. What about the walking paths? We've heard more in the past about how the open space, some of the open space would be used for walking paths. I don't see them. And we also heard that there would be expansion of the existing trails that go through the area. Those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think we had a couple of people concede their time to their first speaker. Do we have next on the list?
Okay, looks like Rochelle Latimer is up, and then we have Michael Wilson and Mary Coolidge.
Thank you.
Hi. First, I want to clarify before I start my comments, just that I know I'm representing myself, but I know you guys had a question about the gate that we have on Alpine Meadows on John Scott Trail, and I do want to clarify that the fire department does have access to the lock on there, so they can open it at any time when we do have emergencies, because I do know that that was a question earlier.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
Is it double locked?
It is open. The fire department is able to open it. There's a lock so that we can open it from our end, but there's a lock that
So they can bypass your lock?
They can bypass our lock.
Okay, because I heard differently earlier.
It is supposed to be so that they can bypass the lock. And I will go and verify that right after this meeting, but that's the goals that, and after my comments and after all of the public comments, I'm happy to address anything else about that if you guys have questions. I am Rochelle Latimer. My family has owned a home in the Bear Creek Subdivision in Alpine Meadows for over 50 years. As my written comments have stated, I would like to thank Placer County staff for the efforts taken to modify the plans to reduce the environmental impact of the Alpine Sierra subdivision. I also want to express my great appreciation for the county, the applicant, and the North Tahoe Fire Protection District to develop this emergency early warning system that could benefit the entire Alpine Meadows Valley. I want to thank you all for listening to the concerns that we raised last October 2017 at the Planning Commission meeting. As you consider the proposed Alpine Sierra subdivision, I encourage you to consider Alternative D, the environmentally constrained alternative. As Alex indicated in his comments, this is similar, but it does reduce 3 lots, which includes the elimination of 2 of the 4 stream crossings along the unnamed tributary within the eastern portion of the project. It increases the protection and avoidance of environmentally sensitive areas, including riparian and floodplain habitat. It does increase the amount of total open space within the project, and it reduces impervious surface areas, allowing for greater amount of stormwater runoff and infiltration. And, according to state regulations, that public agencies should not approve projects as proposed if there is a feasible alternatives which would substantially lessen the significant environmental effects of such projects. And the final EIR does confirm that alternative D is both feasible and reduces the environmental impact of the project. So I encourage you to approve alternative D. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Michael Wilson. I'm a homeowner in Alpine Meadows Estates. As I said last time when you met here, when is enough enough? There's really no transparency how far Placer County is going to go. The next Summit County, Park City. Doesn't happen down in Rockland, does it? Or does it get rubber stamped down there like this one will? Sounds pretty nice. They've done some extravagant projections and maps and all kinds of lovely photos, but this is not Squaw Valley. This is Alpine Meadows. This is our quiet little neighborhood, unlike much where probably you live. It's quiet. There's no road noise. Sitting out in my backyard is much like listening to the Masters golf tournament on TV. I can hear the birds right now. In a very short time, what I'll hear is that maintenance building that's going up right in my own backyard. Oh, and plus I get the lovely smell of a lift station now. Lovely. Thanks a lot. When is enough, guys? We got so many eyesores throughout this whole county, throughout Squaw Valley, Kings Beach, many different neighborhoods. How much wider does the footprint have to be to expand your ever-growing tax base? Why not improve what we already have? I'm surprised Sierra foundations and other wildlife people and nature people aren't here to put this down. But it's disgusting. You guys should be more transparent on how far this whole giant plan of yours is going to be. How big are we going to get? You're putting the cart before the horse. We don't even have enough roads around here right now, let alone another development. This will all are homes that'll get Airbnb'd for the highest price possible and put more traffic on our roads that are already congested and we can't get around. That's probably why we don't see you up here around the 4th of July or Christmas week, because you can't deal with the traffic. Think about it, guys. And I hope you think about it about 12 o'clock at night tonight or 2 in the morning. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Coolidge. I've been in Alpine Meadows since 1971, full-time resident. My father designed the lodge there, so I've been there since the day it opened. And I know that this area is zoned for housing, and it was in the original master plan, but I keep thinking in the olden days, our houses were about 1,200 square feet. Some of them were 8, some of them were 14, but there was nothing as big as 2,000 feet. So I'm looking at the plans here, and I think, these are giant homes, especially when you take into account the terrain that they're going to be sitting on. So I would like it if somehow they could be maybe made smaller. And I do appreciate all the work that Alex has done and everybody's done to make the initial offering even smaller. But I would concur with Rochelle and ask you to look seriously at alternative D, mostly because of the 2 bridges that they've proposed to put over that creek. And again, if they don't have to do that, it's better for the environment, it's better overall, it's less construction, it leaves more open space. And I guess I'm concerned still with the traffic issues. The fire issues I thought have been covered pretty well today. I really appreciate all the work that the firefighters have done, as well as the builder and, God, all of a sudden I forgot his name, Doug Clyde. I just think we need to really look again at the overall impact of more development in the valley, in the basin. we've seen a lot of bad fires, especially the last couple of years, and more development means more potential loss of life. So I don't know what the answer is. I think working with the Forest Service to try to get that road easement makes a lot of sense. There's fire roads there. There's a pretty good fire road system that comes down from that water tower into the Alpine Meadows estates already. Maybe that could be utilized, I don't know. But I think if we can minimize it further, it would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, is that everybody?
No, and I'm sorry, I did get the pronunciation on your name, Casper? Yes.
I'm Casper Hirschbrenner, fairly long time resident Alpine Meadows, full time now. And all I really want to say is Judy Bronner laid out pretty clear all the reasons why this project should not be approved by you. So I'm going to save you the time to listen to me. Just read her message and follow it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else that wish to address the commission before we close the public comment? Okay, with that, we will close the public comment, and would the applicant like a chance to come up and respond to some of this?
Just some really minor comments. The one comment about the trails and paths, it's very clear in the EIR that we're providing significantly more trails. We will provide them with public easements. They don't have, they're ad hoc trails right now, they don't have easements, and part of our mitigation is to make those trails available to the public. Again, we've been over the code issues ad infinitum. I just want to emphasize once again that both the California Fire Code and as well as the International Code allow the discretion of the fire marshal to provide compliance in these matters. So I think that the representation that it doesn't meet code is simply an erroneous one. Thank you.
Question?
Question?
Yes, sorry. There's
a easement trail that goes through the subdivision.
Right.
And that apparently you're going to work out an agreement to relocate it?
Hopefully, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so this is probably an earthen path that has been used by horses and whatever in the past? Is it going to dump out on a road where
no
horses won't use it?
No, the relocated road, the relocated easement, excuse me, does not utilize the emergency access road. I wouldn't say that it won't cross it. It'll cross it, but it doesn't go down it.
Well, it comes back through the rest of the subdivision to the south, right?
Yes,
on the
correct.
southern end, does it intersect a road?
It'll cross a couple of roads. Yep.
It'll cross but not be on the road.
Cross but not be on the road, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There were just a couple points that I thought I had mentioned, but wanted to come back just a couple minutes. One of the slides, I have the clicker. There is a photo but we didn't mention this before, but there is provision for a helicopter landing pad too. So that is potentially another means of emergency response. And also like to say, I think that there's been a lot of discussion about this project being big and high density. Theoretically, the zoning could allow up to like 100 units. We studied a lodge, we studied higher density condos. So from our perspective, we have really tapered back the density quite a bit. And I just wanted to reinforce that. And 38 units is it's just under 6% of the existing housing stock in Alpine Meadows in total. And then last, I had forgotten that prior to the effort in 2013-14 to work on the BCA alternative, we did make a written proposal a good 4 or 5 years ahead of that to BCA for an emergency vehicle access only. And we offered to lower the power lines along John Scott Trail as consideration for that. So we did make an effort actually before we engaged for a year in a plan. So I just wanted to make the point that we've kind of exhausted all opportunities and are open to open doors, not just with the Forest Service in the future, but with our adjoining subdivision neighbors. Thank you.
You see another question? Question?
Sorry.
Okay, you have a community room or building that's 1,000 square feet. But then there's a, I guess it's called an SIP. That's
Shelter in
3,000 square feet.
3,000
And
square feet.
at least the way I'm interpreting it, that's the housing for the employees as well as a garage?
That structure will accommodate an HOA meeting facility, shelter in place for all the residents, and then within that structure would be a unit for the HOA home caretaker, if you will.
Okay, so that's a 3,000 square foot.
Within that, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Well, I'd like to first say that I'm not opposed to development. I used to be a developer, so I'm one of those guys. So, but I do believe very strongly that any development that we look at has to reasonably mitigate the impacts to the community, and especially as it relates to the risks to the community. It needs to be able to bring that to a level that does not create more hazards. I may have a little bit of a bias. I have had contacts with people in Paradise because I have business relationships up there. And what I've heard from them is beyond horrific of what they went through. And it's given me a whole different appreciation for fire, even though I served on a fire agency board for 7 years. I've never heard stories that I heard from them. This fire was, the fire behavior has changed. The intensity level is extreme now. The fire there was moving at a football field a second. It's pretty hard to get out of the way of something like that. Ken Pimlott, who was the CAL FIRE chief who just retired in December, was saying that in the first 12 hours, they didn't fight fire. They were just trying to rescue people. And if you have intense fires like that, it's going to devastate a community, and it certainly devastated Paradise. And it's the human impact, it's the environmental impact, and it's the fiscal impact that Butte County is going to feel not for years, but for decades. And I don't want to see that happen in Placer County. So I agree with Ken Pimlott as he was going out the door. He said that we really need to reevaluate the WUI areas and what we're doing in them. And even the governor on Tuesday, when he was in Colfax, alluded to that as well. And while would not propose or suggest that we should stop developing in WUI areas, I really think a pause is in order to do something to make sure that we are protecting our communities. I know I'm sort of on my soapbox a little bit right now, but I hope you can appreciate what I went through, and I wasn't there for those people in Paradise, but I felt that every bit of their emotion as they told me about what they went through. And I'm confident that some of these people are going to have PTSD issues because of this. It was just unbelievable what they went through. So okay, I'm done with that part of it, but I will say that a big issue to me, I already mentioned it, is that I really believe that if we're going to protect communities, we've got to make sure that we give them as many options as we can. And having not having that EVA is a big deal to me, a really big deal. And I know that, the developer is telling us that they've exhausted every possibility. I don't buy that. I believe that there are exceptions in every case, and you just don't push hard enough. And if you can't get it at the local level, you move up. I mean, again, I was a developer. I went up against the wall a lot of times, and I found ways around it. So my position is from here is that if we do approve this, and I have some reluctance in it just because of pushing more development into an area that's already challenged, I would really suggest to the commission that we make it a condition of approval that that EVA has to happen. That's just kind of where I'm at right at the moment, so at least now you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Well, I'm sympathetic to your cause, and I think that the point is well taken that we really need to find emergency accesses for this project if we can. And I don't know that we can. I don't want to stand up and beat myself on the chest and say there's got to be some way somewhere that the Forest Service or adjoining neighbors or somewhere we can squeeze out an easement to create a emergency access. But I certainly would like to. I guess where I am is I'm supportive of the project basically, but I also would like to have the opportunity to try and find alternatives and an access. So I'm sort of suggesting that we continue it for 30 days or so and see if we can't negotiate as a county with the Forest Service or the homeowners groups or whoever to find some willingness to at least have an emergency access that we can stand up and say this is something that can be worked out now. And have it maintained, because I know that the one time I went through, I don't know whose property I was on or where I was. It was in a blizzard, but it was in the middle of the night and there was no lights and I had no idea where I was. But there really needs to be, because of the avalanche danger from my perspective and also fire, there needs to be an alternative way to get in and out in that area, because you never know what's going to happen. It's just the way the world is. So I would like an opportunity to attempt to see if our staff and with us in conjunction try to create an alternative way out of there for fire or avalanche issues, if we can do it, and schedule it, in 30 days to rehear it.
Well, if you don't mind me, I'll just piggyback on that. One possibility is that we condition it, if the commission wants to do that, and this obviously has to go to the Board of Supervisors, and that's going to take some time before it gets on their agenda, and that would give time to work on it. And then the supervisors can obviously override our recommendation of the COA, and if they can't find something, in 30 days, well, then the board can make that decision one way or the other.
My 2 cents worth. I see there's some benefits to the surrounding communities with this project. The Type 1 engine is obviously a significant investment and is something that is certainly not going to be used exclusively within the new development. It will be responding to requests for service at every place in the area that that particular station it's housed at responds to. I think that one of the reasons that we see fires burning differently, as Commissioner Nader has said, is because forests aren't being, there's been a hands-off policy for a lot of the forested areas in the state for a long time. So the ladder fuels and the ground fuels that are in existence are thick, they're substantial, and they bring the fire up into the canopy of the trees and make it much more intense. I think what we've been told we'll see here is a substantial reduction in the area of those type of fuels with the management plan for the forest that, again, will be mutually beneficial, not just for this subdivision, but for the communities that neighbor it. I think that, and I have seen this before, that in an attempt to not negotiate things like an EVA, the feeling is that it will stop the project. And that may very well be a fact. However, if the project were to be approved, it might then change the attitude of negotiation with neighbors into coming up with something that is mutually beneficial, not only for this development to ingress and egress in case of emergency, but for neighboring communities to have a better ingress and egress point in case of a avalanche or fire or other emergency there also. So I think it's something that needs to be, I guess, considered as we move forward.
My thoughts, I agree with you, Jeff, that I think we probably should move forward, but I don't mind waiting 30 to so days and having the county staff work with the congressman, work with others to try and resolve that issue with the Forest Service in their interpretation of that access for the emergency access. But I don't think I want to condition it on that coming, because between the adjacent neighbors and the Forest Service, there's no way that can be guaranteed. And I think the in-place plans and what has been recommended actually will improve the site. I've been on the site, and it is heavily fueled on the floor. So it's going to help the subdivisions on both sides of this site to have that cleaned up. Want to make a comment also. Somebody asked, how far do we go? The general plan tells you exactly how far this county is going, and we have to comply with the general plan. That is a constitution of this county. So one of the things that I would recommend to the staff is maybe we should be taking a look at the general plan. Are the densities appropriate? Is it time to reevaluate that? Realizing to reduce densities, there are some issues with property and property rights that would have to be looked at. But it's probably time to reevaluate that in light of these developments. But to go back, the general plan does tell you exactly how far this county is going to go. So there's a clear picture in the general plan of what the uses are that have been anticipated for some time.
Thank you. Any other comments?
If I may, just for a moment to provide a couple of points of clarification for the commission. And Commissioner Haughey's comments are noted and are a good jumping off point. I'll take them in reverse. Just to address the issue of the holding capacity for this project and how that relates to implementation of this community plan and the broader general plan. If the project were approved, it would implement 38 units. The holding capacity under the general plan land use designations is 101 units. So there's a pretty significant reduction there. That's just a small clarification. I think the bigger issue is pertaining to the discussion about the alternative access, whether it be an EVA or a full access. Two things. We would definitely need substantially more than 30 days to deal with this issue. Just through my experiences with the Forest Service trying to facilitate negotiation of what kind of standards we'd be looking at for an alternative trail and alignment, we really haven't gotten a lot of response from them, so we would need a little bit longer time period. The second part, probably the bigger part, is that's not something that is presently analyzed in the EIR, and so that's an analysis that we could append, but that may, ultimately, I'd have to defer to our environmental consultant, but there may be a chain of effects, perhaps a partial recirculation, some other things like that. We don't know what we don't know right now, so just things for your consideration.
One comment, to me, it's not just looking at this EVA. I think the county needs to talk to the Forest Service throughout the county, because I think there's probably other locations where emergency access routes make sense. And so to me, I would look at it on a countywide basis, looking at the regulations of the Forest Service, taking a look where there may be potential for better access and approach it that way.
And thank you. That's a great point to clarify. The EVA, you know, and I'll distill it into a simpler topical discussion. The real the secondary access, or EVA, that feasibly attains true secondary access to the project physically, the only real EVA for the eastern portion of the project at any rate is through the neighboring Bear Creek Association subdivision. Connecting to the Forest Service land, there is a trail system that at points is akin to a Jeep road. It's several miles long to get out to the other end of the valley. There's not a true road in place. That's something that would be a very large piece of infrastructure to improve. To actually get out to Alpine Meadows Road is probably on the order of 3 miles through that route, using Forest Service land if the Forest Service were to grant full access over their property. And then there may be other physical legal barriers at the other end with crossing other private properties. I don't recall off the top of my head if there's an actual connection point of that, Forest Service trail to a roadway.
You want a motion?
I have a few comments. Excuse me. I too am deeply concerned about the EVA issue, and I'm troubled by approving a project where my conscience could be in the future dealing with this kind of issue with the serious condition. I do understand the benefits of this development. I understand what it does for the community. I think there are tremendous benefits that extend beyond this development. I was encouraged by the fire department sharing about the shelter-in-place structure and learning more about that. So I'm conflicted with this project a little bit. And I think, to me, the biggest issue is the EVA at this point. And so if there was some conditional piece around that, I think that would help resolve what I'm conflicted with.
Commissioner Stevenson, you said you had a motion you'd like to make?
Well, it's a pretty tough position to be in, to have this attitude that you can't go to another agency and get a little help to solve what seems to be a fairly simple problem. Just an access to some property. Now, I think it's unfortunate that this property has been zoned for development at the same time everybody else that lives in Alpine Meadows property was zoned for their development. So this isn't something that's come along lately. It's something that's been there since day one. And everybody's known it, and it was inevitable it was going to come sometime. We're not creating new zoning or additional zoning. We're not adding areas. We're just developing areas that were permitted to be developed in the very beginning, is my understanding. And if I make a statement that's wrong, stop me. But I don't always understand everything exactly right. And so I think it's a little bit unfortunate that we all learn so much over time about avalanche and on roads and fire dangers and a lot of things since the rights were granted to all the people in Alpine Meadows for the development. And I think that this is sort of the last little bit of proposal that I know of anyway, or it's been authorized by this county in that area. And so it's like, you know, if you're the last one in the door, they slam it in your face kind of thing. And it's kind of unfortunate. And I wish there was a solution that we could put our hand on to solve the access problem. Now, it's my understanding, if I'm wrong on this, correct me, that there is a lock available for emergency use to cut through the adjacent subdivision. Is that correct?
Not quite. So the Alpine Estates Association and Bear Creek Association, their roadways are interconnected, and there is a gate that is locked, except under emergency situations where they would be unlocked. And that roadway presently is not physically available to this project for access. The only way to get access to it would be to loop access down from here down to the neighboring subdivision. And that was the effort that Mr. Nelson explained. They took a pause for about a year during the entitlement process, during the preparation of the draft EIR, to attempt to negotiate that outcome, and it did not work out.
Well, that's unfortunate that it ended up that way. I wish we could have foreseen that as an issue in the day one and created a homogeneous situation on into the future, and that's, I guess we're not as good of planners as we thought we were when you get down to that kind of a relationship, because it's my personal belief that when safety and fire and that kind of thing are an issue, that everyone should be cooperating with one another, and it's unfortunate that we don't have it. And probably if this project or the development potential for this project hadn't been approved at the same time all of their properties had been approved, I would probably feel differently about it right now. But frankly, I'm leaning towards letting them have what they're entitled to, or less than what they were originally entitled to, mainly because they came in the door at the same time when the original Alpine Meadows plan was created and adopted. So there's some history back there that it's unfortunate that things ended up the way they did. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was unfortunate that it ended the way it was, because I'm sure at some point in time in the future the roles will be reversed and all of this will get worked out perhaps. I don't know, but it makes it very difficult to move forward with a project when you've got an adverse relationship going on between areas within a larger area, you know. And
I just wanted to add that I think Alex just answered my question. If the EVA through the Forest Service is going to be 3 miles long, there's a considerable amount of work that goes into locating the right-of-way, as well as doing the environmental work. And so that would be a ways off before. I mean, even if they could get approval, and I think it would take more of a community approval than individual property. You know, I mean, if the community of Alpine Meadows was proposing it, I think the Forest Service would be obligated to listen to this, other than just relying on the federal regulation that says you can only have one access. And also, you know, if you want to continue discussions, I'd say you probably need to go to the Forest Supervisor's office and maybe even hire the Forest Service to get, you know, attention to this project. I kind of agree with Larry where it's really unfortunate that the adjacent subdivisions are unwilling to allow for an EVA gate EVA gates are for emergency purposes. And it sounds like that EVA gate is used as a back road to get to town. And, because everybody's got a lock on it, got a key on it. And, okay, well, that's what we're hearing, you know, from the fire chief. Sometimes he gets his lock locked out of it. And so, at any rate, you know, a connection here with this subdivision gives the people in the adjacent subdivision another access point on an emergency basis. Now, it would be an emergency gate, not a road that they're going to go down to get to town, but it'll be an emergency gate. But it surely does give the adjacent subdivision another option of escape. And so I kind of agree with Larry. It's unfortunate that the community is so separated on this issue. It makes it real hard to deal with what we're talking about.
I'm sorry, the public comment is closed.
Really, you can't speak, but you can?
Yes, exactly.
You're characterizing,
No.
Chris is correct that at one time there was a communication about emergency access. The most recent one was not about emergency access. But currently, they still would need to cross undeveloped land within the adjacent subdivision, the Bear Creek Association. So it's not as if where their current road is immediately would come down to where their current road is proposed would have immediate access to a road.
It's not about opening a gate, it's about.
I think the other issue we have to look at, though, is that the fire service professionals have told us that this meets their criteria and/or exceeds it. It's not often that we hear that criteria is exceeded when it comes to life safety issues. And I think that needs to be given a lot of credibility because fire service professionals are not bashful in making demands to make sure that those they're responsible for protecting are well cared for. And I think that deserves a lot of credibility. If my understanding is correctly, the developer is putting in the potential EVAs up to a certain point where if later agreements can be reached, they won't be precluded from being built. And, you know, maybe as time goes by and conditions change and worried about future potential use and that can be addressed, that this would be something that could be achieved. But in the meantime, we've been told by those responsible for approving the plans and addressing the life safety issues that they've been met. And I don't think we can ignore that.
Yeah. Alex, could you put the recommendation back up, please?
Do I have the? Yeah, while Alex does that, maybe I'll just chime in here and kind of focus on what the commission is being asked to do today. The commission is being asked to take action on 5 recommendations from staff. So what that leaves you with, and based on the conversations from all the commissioners, that leaves one option that you make a recommendation on those 5 actions of the project that's being proposed today. You can also continue this project to an open date to allow further discussions on the EVA. So that leaves you 2 options. But I may suggest asking the applicant if they had a preference between you actually taking action on the project today, making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, or giving them time to have further discussions about the EVA.
I think we ought to find out where the commission is right now. I think Larry wants to make a motion, so
just before
I think we're in a box. I don't think there's any, we either have to move it on or, I think if we can approve it as you're suggesting, and then maybe put a footnote on it suggesting that the county should make an attempt to
broker a deal,
find an easement, an emergency easement as part of the approval by the time it gets to the board and let that go as just a footnote, but not a requirement. Is that printed on a piece of paper anywhere?
What, the recommendation?
Yeah.
Something simpler.
Let's see, should we
Page.
have- This isn't the same as that.
No, that's much more condensed.
Before starting.
Page 32 in the staff report
Okay, hold on, we
package.
got another question or comment.
Page 32 in the staff report package.
I think I have it now.
I've
Hold on,
reviewed all the letters that
Well, he's
came
got
in,
it
listened
now.
to the testimony. I haven't seen any new evidence regarding the environmental document. Could you comment? Was there new evidence that you have to respond to?
You know, I'd like to defer to our environmental consultant if I could, if at the commission's pleasure.
Please.
Okay. Catherine?
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Waugh. I'm a senior project manager with DUDEC, and we're the county's, excuse me, environmental consultant for this project. And so I have also reviewed all of the comment letters that have come in since the final EIR was published, and as well as the comments that were provided today. And there hasn't been anything new, any new issues raised. Most of the comment letters were reiterating comments that were addressed in the final EIR. But I'd be happy to, excuse me, talk about any specifics.
I think that probably answered the question.
You answered the question.
Thank you.
We did hear that maybe we should ask the developer if he
I think we got a
be able
nod
to
that
do
he
it.
would like to hear from the commission here. I think we got a nod that he would like to hear from the commission.
Oh, okay.
Do you want a
Larry?
motion to approve? Is that all right if I make a motion?
Please.
All right, I'll move that we certify the Alpine Sierra Subdivision Final Environmental Impact Report prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act and adopt the mitigation monitoring reporting program supported by and incorporated by reference in its entirety in the findings of fact and errata to the final EIR included as attachment G in the report packet.
I'll second.
I would just like to amend that. This is a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to certify, not
Yes.
to certify here today.
It is.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please, Sue.
I have a motion by Mr. Sevison, a second by Mr. Haughey. So vote from Mr. Haughey, please.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes?
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Thank you.
All right. We have a motion for item number 2.
Okay, number 2, adopt a resolution to amend the Alpine Meadows General Plan Land Use Program as shown in attachment C to this report and supported by the findings in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Roll call, please, Sue.
Again, I would like to note that this is a
This is a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Yeah.
I have a first by Mr. Sevison, a second by Mr. Haughey. So could I have a vote for Mr. Haughey, please?
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Thank you.
Number 3, the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors is to adopt an ordinance to rezone the Alpine Sierra subdivision project site as shown in attachment D to this report and supported by the findings in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please, Sue.
Another first by Mr. Sevison, a second by Mr. Haughey. So Mr. Haughey.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes?
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Thank you.
4th, approve the Alpine Sierra subdivision vesting Kennedy subdivision map supported by the findings in the staff report
And
Recommended to the.
and recommended to the Board of Supervisors.
And is this where we reference the modified conditions of approval that were discussed early on?
corrected.
Correct. The only clarification is to the tentative map exercise date changed from April 19th, 2022 to April 23rd, 2022.
Okay, note the correction of the date.
First and a second. Roll call, please.
Another first by Mr. Sevison, a second by Mr. Haughey. Mr. Haughey.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
No.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Thank you.
Oh, we're losing our numbers.
Item 5, please.
Number 5.
Before we
is
move to
also-
number 5, I just wanted to clarify, for number 4, was the motion to approve the subdivision map as worded in the recommendation, or was it with an additional condition of approval? I wanted to make sure we were all on the same
Just with the
page
conditions as
on that.
modified with the change of date.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Number 5, approve the conditional use permit for the Alpine Sierra Plan residential development supported by the findings in the staff report
Have a third?
and findings in the environmental report.
We have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please, Sue.
First by Mr. Sevison, a second by Mr. Haughey. So a vote from Mr. Haughey, please.
Yes.
Mr. Herzog.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
No.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Thank you.
That passes. Is that it?
We are done.
All right. With that, I thank you all for coming out, your input, and meeting's adjourned.